And we kick off with a really exciting fireside chat on balancing people, process, and technology towards creating an agile organization. Moderating this panel, we saw him earlier on, is Oratile Sematle, Digital Business Solutions Lead, Southern Africa and North America at Sasol. I'm going to ask him to join me on stage, and he's going to be speaking to Faith Byrne, CIO at Eskom. So that's one of the speakers, and then the other speaker is Werner Leithgob, Head of Functional and Technology, Program Horizon, Coca-Cola Beverages, Africa. So I'm going to ask Faith and Werner to join us on stage, and Oratile, I'm going to hand over to you to take us into the afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Great. Let's give them a big round of applause as they make their way up on stage.
I hope I'm audible. Am I audible? Yeah. Great. Again, good afternoon, everyone. I think just to bring Faith and Werner on board, we've been through a journey throughout today, and these topics that we're going to be discussing actually came up multiple times. There's big concerns about skills. People mention issues like our universities are actually producing for academic purposes and not necessarily for the business world purposes. Issues about the technological development itself. How do you actually adopt technology to create value? Everything does not need to be automated. What should actually be at the center of using technologies? Processes. I myself talked earlier about self-correcting processes, and I think with this session, we now need to put it all together. But I would like us to have this unconstrained view of this, agile organization. How do we bring people, processes, technology all together? But before we do that, let me allow you to kind of introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about, your passion about technology, what do you, any insights you'd like to share, looking forward or looking backwards, that will highly be appreciated. So Faith, let me start with you.
Good afternoon. You all look very energized. So I hope you'll be energized enough for our conversation. My name is Faith Byrne. I'm at Eskom, as they've said. I have a dual background. I have an IT background. My education and everything is in IT. But I also have an internal audit background, so I'm also a certified internal auditor. So sometimes when I do audit speak, people get really surprised. And then that is how I speaks in auditing terms. But if we can talk about skills, I was at the University of Pretoria last week, and we were talking exactly about that, about how are we educating people and the skills complex. I mean, what was interesting for me as I was preparing for this was to understand that there's a skills gap everywhere in the world. So it's not just an African or South African issue, it's actually everywhere. One publication said there's 200 million people looking for jobs. But then on the other side, there are lots of organizations who are looking for people. And one journalist said, we don't have a skills gap in South Africa, we've got a canyon. Right? So very interesting, and I saw some information around Europe, that even in Europe, because I don't know if you're like me, but I kind of tend to think that, oh well, we're in Africa, so Europeans are probably a little bit more ahead of us, but even in Europe, people aren't digitally ready. So the readiness, the digital readiness. And as I was doing that, I was thinking, look at me, I got this little book, I'm a CIO, but I've got this little book with little notes and stuff like that, and I thought, maybe I'm part of the canyon. But So people aren't, so we've got people looking for jobs, and we've got people looking to employ. And in South Africa, that's a big canyon, and so what do we do about it? And I'm sure we'll get into that.
Yeah.
I just wanted to set the context for now, so I'm not going to go into my thoughts. And
I'll come back right into it. Werner, welcome, and
Thank you.
please, if you can, also just introduce yourself and touch a little bit on your perspective on skills, technology, and constant
Perfect.
view. I just want us to just have a conversation, bring in the audiences. I may actually have to disrupt some of the processes we followed and just allow the audiences to engage with us because we actually haven't had that opportunity. So I don't like following rules. I'm actually surprised I'm not fired yet.
Well, I mean, if you're doing digital disruption has a word to it, right? So I'm Werner Leithgob. I work for Coca-Cola Beverages Africa. We span across 13 countries on the continent at the moment. We are a growing business, so we are constantly seeking to expand our footprint on the African continent. My passion really, within the context of this conversation, is around, skills, number one, but also the people aspect. What I found in my journey throughout my career, that technology adoption is a very difficult thing to get right if you don't take people along on the journey. And technology adoption typically has a fear factor towards it, right? And that fear factor is, you're going to put in this PC or this software. Am I still going to have a job at the end of the day once you automate and you've got AI and machine learning, etc.? So for me, it's always important to understand why we are digitally transforming certain parts of our organization. And I often use a simple example when it comes to the people thing is, and I'm sure a lot of people can put up their hands to this question. They might be shy not to put it up. But how many of you know highly qualified CAs in your organization, or actuaries as an example, that for the majority of their time build the income statement or balance sheet for those exco presentations at the end of the month? They spend a week and it's month end and it's this. And these are highly skilled people, right? Yeah. And when you start looking at how do you harness the capability of people with technology, what you actually want to do is you want to unleash the reason you hired that person in the first place.
Yeah.
Right? They need to do an actual real job, doing, I'm not a finance guy, right? So, but actually doing all kinds of fancy, financial modeling on where's our next profit and our margins and our forecasts, etc. Instead of having him pull data, pull together an income statement, this is my EBIT for the month, this is that, etc. And for me, there's a big passion in just demystifying this digital journey that people need to go on and unlocking the value of people they have employed from the beginning.
Wow. No, this topic about people and skills, it actually reminds me when we kicked off this digital transformation journey at Sasol, one of the brightest, considering very bright executives, asked the question, how do we take the communities in which you operate with us? So it then open up this can of worms to say the issues of skill and development is not only inward-looking type of thing, we also need to look outside organizations. At Sasol, for an example, we operate in underprivileged communities like Secunda, Sasolburg. How do we transform those communities? Because those are actually our stakeholders. We call them over the fence stakeholders. And it tells me that the skill people quotient, it's actually big. And I like the fact that, and it blows my mind, you mentioning that companies are looking for millions of people are looking for jobs. There's a gap there. How do we solve this?
Exactly, how do we solve it? And it's quite interesting because you were talking about how stakeholders, that it's not just an organization problem. And what's interesting is it's not just the employee that benefits when you actually skill, because we do need to talk about how do we reskill and how do we upskill. From an Eskom perspective, we have a responsibility towards our country. I joined Eskom 2 years ago, and I joined them because I want to be part of the solution. So yes, I signed up. Andre convinced me, and I was like, I'm going to help solve a problem. And remember, when you try and help solve, I'm detracting a little bit.
Yeah,
when you try and
great
help
point.
solving a problem, you always get the darkest night first, and then you get through to the solution. Just side note.
Yeah.
But so we have responsibility at Eskom towards people. We have committed to our country that we will not retrench. So we're one of very few organizations that haven't retrenched during this COVID period. And so everyone has that security of their job. But now we need to be relevant, right? And so it's upskilling, it's reskilling, and how do you then do that? And your communities are as important because we can focus on the people in our company, and that's a very short-term focus. But what about the pipeline, right? So what about who comes next? You mentioned the universities, how are they teaching? You know, there's a famous quote that says, that talks about teachability. Your teachability index is you to learn multiplied by your willingness to change. And so it's both sides, right? So there's the person needs to have that teachability, but we also need to look at how do we then impact our communities. Because when we impact our communities, our organizations have a higher impact on the communities. You know, as Eskom, for example, we struggle with theft, right? You are impacted when that happens, and then you sue us. We can hear you. But can you imagine, and because we've seen how communities operate, right? Especially the informal settlements. We know how they will take control and say, you don't do this to our children, or you don't do this in our community. And so can you imagine if we actually combined efforts in terms of skilling, and we actually invested also from a community perspective, how that then changes how the community views your organization, like SAB, ABI, and how they then give you loyalty because they know what you've done.
Great. I'll come back to this people and skills issue, but I just want to jump quickly into the technological part. I mean, we talked a lot earlier about multiple layers of the technologies, from architectural setup into human-machine collaboration. AI. There's been polarizing view on AI. Some people believe it has not met its promise. It promised us so much, but we still need to get there. Other people probably believe that it has delivered so much already. So, Werner, with this, again, unconstrained view, what are your perspective if you look at the South African landscape in terms of what is it we can actually do with technology?
No, so I suppose in the South African context, what companies or businesses often struggle with is to understand how do I differentiate my business of what I need to do and what I have to do. There's two very different things, right? So what we've done is we've really taken an approach on saying, okay, I've got commodity processes in my organization. And no offense to the HR community, but HR processes are typical commodity. Like payroll, the normal stuff. Then I've got processes in my environment that put me ahead of my competitors in the market, right? And we as a beverage company, we have many competitors. So our approach is really saying when looking at technology and AI and the cloud and my architecture, etc., is to start looking at your foundational technology first. And a simple foundational thing is everything needs to be able to talk to each other, right? In this age of data being the absolute gold mine to everything, the more you can have your environments, your systems, etc., talk to each other, the more golden nuggets of information, trending, etc., you can get out. But you also have to start asking yourself, is where am I going to invest my AI capability in? Depending on the type of sector I'm in or industry I'm in, I'm not going to really look at AI in my commodity processes, right? Because those are day-to-day things that need to run. They're not giving me a competitive advantage. As a manufacturing company, a lot of your AI opportunities sit within your plant maintenance type of area, looking at your machinery. How does this machinery interact on a hot day, on a cold day? How often do I buy this specific wing nut or this filler, etc., and what are the circumstances around that? Because that, at the end of the day, is your bread and butter. So you have to be very deliberate in looking for the right technology enabler in the right process that you run that gives you a competitive advantage. I mean, at the end of the day, payroll is payroll, but if I don't get the amount of cases of Coca-Cola off the production line, that's a big problem, right?
And don't you think,
Yeah, please. Please, yeah.
So don't you think also that, because for me, around digitalization and the fourth industrial revolution, for me, it's about solving a business problem, a business outcome. And that is why the transactional and the operational kind of payroll running, etc. But when you're focusing on, let me solve a real problem or a real outcome, then you plug in the AI.
Yeah, and I mean, just to jump on top of that and moving a little bit back, right, where you touched on the topic of skill. What I found is quite lacking in South Africa is not doers. There's a lot of doers, right? There's a lot of technical guys that understand architecture, governance, etc., etc. But there's not a lot of people that have the ability to problem solve something or even identify the problem, right? And that's something a university does not teach you. It does not. And for me, what's very important as an organization is get those young guys from university that have textbook knowledge, but then put them in, the hot seat to solve problems and let them fail forward. Eventually, out of the 10 things they try and problem solve, they will problem solve one properly. And you never know, there might lie R1 million cost benefit in that problem that they solve. But universities will not teach you that. Organizations need to take these people on and put them in the hot seat.
Exactly, and when you see the programs that we typically have as organizations, it's a lot of, if we're talking digital, right, digital gap, it'll be tech stuff. Oh, let's skill gap. So when we were talking about the skills gap or the canyon, we were talking now about, tech, but it's actually more than tech, because I think, to your point, right, it's about how can you problem solve? It's about how can you adapt to change? Because if you don't have the ability to adapt, when a newer technology comes along, how then do you handle it, right? And now you suffer from adoption problems, etc. But it's about that, and we were talking to actually at UP about the fact that at universities they get taught these tech skills, but not these soft skills. And I saw that the European Commission what they've done is they created a hub which is called like the Digital Skills Hub, and in there they share tech stuff and they also share jobs and so on, but one of the key things is around teaching people, and I don't know how possible, but it's the soft skills that are as important, which is around how do I, even when I'm scared, because we all have that level of resistance to change, but even though I'm scared of the change, how do I embrace the change?
Yeah. Actually, holding onto the thought of problem solving and innovation, I want to bring this a third element, which is processes, but I want to look at these processes through this lens of problem solving and innovation. You know, one of the CROs at Amazon came to talk to us at Sasol and talked about, you know, this problem solving and innovation and actually how to approach it. Specifically, we're looking at solving, you know, process automation type of issues. He made a very powerful analogy, and that analogy is centered around the ability to disrupt yourself. That analogy was, if you look at in olden days, we used to have coal trains, right? What actually happened there is people did not optimize those trains. What actually happened, people skipped over from train to flight. So what happened there is people looked beyond the existing processes and completely disrupted it. And I'm disrupting myself. So yeah, there's the angle. Actually, I had a light bulb moment when you were saying that, talking about this business processes and stuff. Because I think sometimes we waste a lot of time looking through the processes we have through the old lenses. And you want to automate it, optimize it, but at university we used to have something, GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. If you're not disrupting yourself and thinking about something else completely, you're actually in trouble. And in one of the conferences, somebody spoke about ERP crisis actually across the globe. And I actually agree with that person. I've yet to see a company today that does not have ERP issues. If you think about it, every single company or every single IT person you talk to, it's like, hey, my SAP system, and I've got Oracle, things are not talking to each other, there's fragmentation of systems, there's a need for IT-OT integration, there's multiple sources of truth. If this is updated, it's not updating there, people are working on. There's just a crisis of all of that stuff. The question then is, do we actually need to fix it? Or can we just throw it away? And start afresh? I don't have the answers, I'm just asking the question. Through this, I think we need to think differently about optimization. I think sometimes we believe we are innovating, but we're actually not. We're actually optimizing.
Yeah. The thing about processes is that it's good and bad. It's schizophrenic. We're an organization that is very process-driven, and then what happens is it becomes so bureaucratic, and you would have heard the president talk about our red tape. So it becomes red tape and bureaucratic and all of that, right? And then people forget why that process is there in the first place as controls, because life has moved on, and maybe you actually don't need those steps in the process.
Yeah.
If I can share this quick.
Please, no, not quick. Let's have a conversation.
And there's an analogy of this lady. I like stories. I'm that person, sorry. So there's an analogy of this lady who used to like to roast her lamb, and she would break the bone, when she puts it in. And one day when she was doing that, her daughter asked her, "Mom, why do you break it?" And she said, "You know what? I actually don't know why, but I did it because your mother used to do it. So let's call your grandmother and ask your grandmother why it needs to be broken." So they call the grandmother, and the grandmother says, "No, I had a very small pan." So that's what we do with our processes. It was a small pan then, and so we needed to have those multi-million steps in between. And now we forget that actually the pan's bigger. So how can we then streamline that process?
Well, that's powerful.
Yeah, and I mean the whole process thing for me. I'm a process guy, right? Like in my own personal life, I've got processes, daily processes to optimize my time. At work or at home or with the family, or if I get up and I know I need to make coffee for my wife, I need to make breakfast for my daughter, get this. There's a whole step of process putting on this machine to that, etc. So I save time, right? Now, what I find people often forget, there's also a famous saying that the best run companies run on Excel, right? Now, the companies that are able to perform on Excel are companies that know exactly what each person needs to do in a sequential manner every day. And they have a reason why that person does those steps every single day. Now, if you want to optimize, right, you can only optimize the known. And when you go back to your organization, you really need to ask yourself, do I have a place somewhere where I can access all the processes in my company? Are they documented? Do I have standard operating procedures? Does anybody know who needs to do if something catches a light? You know? And that is a reason why ERP programs fail. Right? People go in with this, I'm going to put in SAP, Oracle, D365, whatever, and I'm just going to move forward and I'm going to switch things and buttons and pretty screens. But they didn't start at a foundation that says, I have these 10 steps that I now need to put into an environment. I know exactly why these steps exist. I know exactly who needs to do them and why they do them. Yeah. I know what the data is that I get out of that step so that I can mine and be clever. And that's why you will still find organizations that say, SAP is not talking to this third party and this thing's falling over, because actually those people don't even know how to run that process on paper. And that's what I've seen. Yeah. Yes, exactly.
And it comes back to the skill. It comes back to that open-mindedness, and are you willing to learn? And do you understand? Are you willing to solve a problem? Because if you're going to optimize a process, you need to apply a problem-solving mindset to optimize that process.
Correct.
Yeah, and I want to come back again and make a circle. Earlier on, I think I was talking about a supply chain issue. But then I touched on an issue of skill to say there's actually a difference between being in a technology space and having domain-specific expertise. If you are going to do a project in a supply chain space, you actually need somebody who knows what's happening and how things work. Because I've seen, I remember when I really started earlier on in my digital journey, we're doing this inventory management solution for works. Flip, I thought I'm smart. That project proved to me that you need to take it easy. And when we finished the tool, the market actually already moved. It was when the Asian market was actually starting to dominate the workspace across the globe. So now customers were a lot more closer to where the volumes are, and the pricing landscape changed completely. And while we were more inventory focused, the market changed. And eventually we got this beautiful tool, but the problem is non-existent now. What we needed somebody who actually understand how markets work. And we didn't have that personality. So it shows you that number crunching in itself, it's just one of the many elements that you need in problem solving and innovation. You need people who actually understand how business work.
Yeah, no, exactly, right. And I mean, there's like practical things. So often businesses go through this, we're going to do this massive business process re-engineering, and we're getting all of these industrial engineers in, and they're going to lay out this whole thing, and they come up with these massive fancy business process diagrams, and we're sorted. Nobody understands it, right? And then eventually they present this to, let's call it the shop floor workers, right? Guys that work in the warehouse, that do this daily. And this guy that you deem does not understand this guy's master's degree, he will tell you all of this heap of paper that you put down here is worth nothing, because the reality of my daily life is different in the warehouse, right? It's a different way of picking. Doesn't matter if your engineer said Fanta needs to sit over here.
Yeah.
The reality for me is I already know there's a shortcut to get to Fanta quicker, and I optimize my picking that way.
Yeah.
So we also don't take the time to actually get that process knowledge or input from the people that work for us at all levels, all right?
Exactly. And talking about, a willingness to learn and being curious.
Yeah.
So even if you're in IT and doing digitalization, I mean, you actually need to touch and feel. One of the
Yes.
things that I do is I want to go to that power station.
Yeah.
Or if I'm in another business, I want to go to that pharmaceutical. Because it's when you're there that you see things that they don't necessarily articulate to you, but you see it with a different eye. Because sometimes we want to give a solution to, let's say, for example, let me use a loose example. In Coca, we've got obviously we're critical infrastructure, it's a national key point, etc. So it's really, really tight security. You can't go in there with your phone. So how can I give you then a solution, a mobile solution, when you don't even have your phone or your laptop with you, right? And it's those kind of things. If I didn't touch it, I would be sitting back here at head office and say, let's do a little app here and a little this there and a little that there. And then no one's using it, and I wonder why the adoption is so low.
Yeah. Looks like we have 2 minutes left. I actually was enjoying this conversation. I thought we were just 5 minutes in. And maybe with that, I just got to sign there 2 minutes.
You need to process engineer the clock.
I think maybe with that, just to end off, maybe let me again reach out to you, Faith and Werner, just to leave the audiences with just one insight. If there's, if you look at what you've done, what you've been through in terms of your career, your understanding in this, technological space, digitization, people process technology, what would be that one insight you would leave with the audiences?
And I think for me, it's the fact that I, as an individual, have the power. I have the power to equip myself. I have the power to affect transformation in my business. So I have the power to say to the business, this is how we can do this skilling program, even if HR is not what I do. I have the power to affect my community. I can do things in the community myself. And I think for me, it's to understand that within us, within me, lies that power, and it's how I then employ it.
Nice. Werner?
Yeah, so I suppose I've got I'm glad Faith did a more personal type of answer, because I can now give a more academic type of answer. I'm not always so good on the soft stuff, but for me, an organization, before they embark on AI, machine learning, this ERP, cloud strategies, whatever, the most important fundamental thing that you need to understand is your own truth. And that truth lies within your data. Start at a foundational level. Number one, nobody should have a secret server under their desk anymore where they run secret click view or BI reports, etc. Start making sure that your organization has a single source of the truth. A place where all of this data from the various environments, even if there is a place for manual input data from employees at a survey level, make sure you have that and you start mining and understanding that first. Because if you don't understand your truth, you're going to spend a lot of money on technology that will add zero value at the end of the day. So that's what I would leave it on.
Thank you. I think, I'm not coming up here again, hopefully. My insight for myself, you probably already know about it with that WAX, inventory management tool failure, is that when you're in a project setup, assume that the person next to you knows something you don't know. With that, thank you. Great conversation. A round of applause, please.
Thank you.